Welcome to today's edition of the Career 100 podcast. Your host, Felicia Gopal, founder of collegefundingresource.com, will be interviewing professionals each week currently working in one of the top careers. We want to expose you to the varied and distinguished careers of our guests and to perhaps inspire you into considering and following in their footsteps. Or better yet, blaze your own trail. So sit back and relax as Felicia interviews professionals about how they came to be in the top careers.
I always tell women and whoever I speak to that engineering is everywhere. You can't live your life without engineering. It's the roads we drive on, it's the chairs we sit in, iPhones, which everybody, loves their technology that we use. That's all designed and created by an engineer.
Hello, it's your host, Felicia Gopal. Welcome to another edition of the Career 100. Today we're going to have a special guest, and we'll be exploring the profession of nuclear engineer. Today's guest was a former model and current nuclear engineer. She found herself in an array of situations, including a sticky one where she once checked Tom Brokaw during a role-play exercise while interviewing to be a White House fellow. She said that she didn't even think about who he was. She just went off by instinct. Jatia holds a doctorate in nuclear engineering from the University of Illinois and works as a non-proliferation specialist at Argonne National Laboratory. In her free time, she nurtures interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields from underrepresented groups through mentorships, speaking, and doing outreach activities with organizations such as City Year, Chicago, the Girl Scouts of America, Women in Science and Technology, the American Nuclear Society, and Society of Women Engineers. It is my pleasure to welcome today's guest, Jatia Taylor.
Thank you for having me. I really am looking forward to speaking with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I talk to young ladies all the time and minorities all the time. And, there's a gap between the need of the nation for more minorities and women to go into engineering and how many are going in. So tell me about how you became to be a nuclear engineer. I can't imagine that, when you were 2, you said to yourself, I really want to be a nuclear engineer.
No, I definitely did not think when I was, graduating high school or even starting college that I would go into nuclear engineering, and it was a very roundabout way. I basically was good in math and science in high school. I actually really enjoyed math and science. I actually went to summer school and took extra classes for math and science, biology. I liked dissecting things, figuring out how things worked. And actually, it was my mother who convinced me I was going to go into business as an undergraduate, and my mother convinced me to go into engineering. She said, you're good at math and science, and, this is a career that, you could really figure out what you want to do, and there's so many diverse fields. So I really have to give a lot of credit for going into engineering to my mom, who was an accountant. So she had a math background, but not necessarily engineering. We both really didn't know where it was going to go.
Got it. It's funny because I was a girl who was really interested in good at math and science. And so, my father was an accountant. So what did I do? In my first career out of college, I was an accountant. It's something that makes a lot of sense. During this series, I actually happened to meet some other women who were really good at math and science, and they became actuaries. Oftentimes, it's the people who are around us who often will influence the direction that we consider. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Definitely. I agree with that. So how I got into nuclear engineering, I was in undergraduate, and I happened to be in Navy ROTC. And for one of our summer experiences, we went underway on a nuclear-powered submarine. And on the submarine was actually nuclear missiles. And so I just thought it was so fascinating that, nuclear power could kind of be used for good and evil. And who were those people who basically decided how they're used and what they're used for. And I thought that was really an area that used my technical ability and also my, sense of wanting to help people, because I know a lot of females, want to go into careers where we help, but there's a lot of helping involved in engineering. I guess that really piqued my interest in the field.
So talk to me a little bit more about helping in the engineering field. I don't think that's a transition that a lot of people would make.
So I always tell women and whoever I speak to that engineering is everywhere. You can't live your life without engineering. It's the roads we drive on. It's the chairs we sit in. It's the, iPhones, which everybody, loves their technology that we use. That's all designed and created by an engineer. And there are specialties of engineering, that are specifically created to how people interact with objects and, all these things. So engineering and helping go hand in hand. We solve problems.
Yeah, actually you do. So what sorts of problems does a nuclear engineer solve?
So nuclear engineering is probably a wider field than most people think about. A lot of people think about nuclear engineering, think about power. But there's also a medical application, there's an agricultural application, and also there's a political science application to nuclear engineering. So when you go in for your x-rays or radiation therapy or imaging sort of things, that's a lot of nuclear engineering. That's a person who is trained in the application of nuclear medicine who administers, if you have radiation therapies, there's somebody who administers the radiation, and there's also somebody who designed the equipment. Those are both people who are trained in nuclear engineering. As far as agriculture goes, there's a lot of fruit and irradiation that goes on in the processing of our food. That's a nuclear engineer who actually develops that machinery, and there's also a nuclear engineer who oversees the process of irradiating the food. And then there's the more typical nuclear power application. And I don't know where you're located, but here in Illinois, in the Chicago area, about 75% of our power comes from nuclear power. So we have a lot of nuclear power plants up here, and this is why Illinois is such a stronghold in the nuclear industry. But, nuclear industry, nuclear power puts out a lot of power, and it's one of the few base load source of energy. So that means it's going to go whether the sun is shining, whether it's raining, whether there's drought. Nuclear energy, fission is going to happen every time, consistently. So that is the great thing about nuclear power, and that is a big part of nuclear engineering. Where I fit into the picture is more of the political science applications, nuclear engineering, and that's nuclear nonproliferation. So nonproliferation basically deals with stopping the spread of nuclear weapons for misuse. So basically, I do a lot of analysis. The U.S. has export controls. There's safeguards. If you've ever heard of weapons inspectors, those are people who do safeguards inspections on facilities to make sure that the materials are being used for power production or radiative therapy or peaceful uses of nuclear energy.
Absolutely. So, that's really kind of fascinating because, we do hear a lot about safeguards and, weapons keeping, and then there was the whole madness in the early 2000s where, we were going in and inspecting and we thought there was nuclear power going on in other countries, and turns out it wasn't quite the way that it was represented. But I could see that that's something that is really, really important. Does it also have application as far as, this whole concept that we've been hearing about in the news of dirty bombs and stuff like that? Is that part of nuclear engineering?
So I guess the people who work to stop the spread of nuclear material getting into the hands of people who would like to use it in a dirty bomb. And for those who don't know, a dirty bomb is basically a bomb that disperses radioactive material. And the whole point of a dirty bomb is not actually to disperse radioactive material, but it's mostly to incite fear and terror in the population. Because if we, have in the media that there's big radioactive release, that makes everybody panic. So it's more of an intent of instilling panic in the population than, some people do damage, but I would guess if you wanted to do more actual damage, it'd be better to go other routes.
Okay, that's fair enough. So are there any myths or misconceptions about being a nuclear engineer?
Sometimes I get some questions about glowing in the dark, which is not at all associated with nuclear engineering. A lot of people have this misconception that radiation is something foreign or something that's bad, but actually radiation is all around us. There's radiation emitting from our food, bananas, kitty litter, those sort of things have radiative elements to it. We get radiation from the sun. People love to tan. We get microwaves. We get TV waves. There's nothing wrong with radiative energy, and it's not necessarily all bad, I guess, is one of the misconceptions about nuclear engineering.
Got it. So if you had the opportunity to go back and talk to a young Jatia and give her advice, what advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you know now, if you had the opportunity to go back 5 years, 10 years?
Well, two things that I would say to myself. One thing is, try every opportunity. Check out all the opportunities that are available to you. I think one of the best experiences that I had was doing internships and talking to other people and job shadowing and just basically experiencing what it would be like to be in a certain job. And the second piece of advice that I would give to young people is trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. Don't let opportunities slip out of your hands because you're scared or you're apprehensive. Really go out there and go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's good advice for young people in general. I think sometimes we are hampered by whatever it is that we believe that we should be doing as opposed to what we could be doing. And it's really in the what we could be doing that are in the opportunities, I think.
Yes.
All right. So is there anything that's changing in your industry that somebody who is just getting started needs to be aware of, Jatia?
Yes, there is a big change happening in nuclear engineering in that our workforce, we have a lot of people at the upper end of our workforce, and then we have a lot of people in the mid to lower, age range in our age force. So it's actually a great opportunity or a great time to go into nuclear engineering just because we have a lot of our workforce retiring. So that is an initiative that's being taken over by the government. They're always trying to get people in STEM, but specifically in nuclear engineering, there's a lot of great opportunities. Everybody I know who is a nuclear engineer is employed and has no problem finding a job. So it's great career opportunities.
Great. So what gets you up in the morning to serve your clients? Are your clients internal, external, a combination of internal and external?
So I am a government contractor, and so most of my clients or customers are government entities. I mainly work for the Department of Energy. Argonne is a Department of Energy-funded national laboratory, and specifically my work is for the National Nuclear Security Administration, the NNSA, and they are basically tasked with the security of nuclear stockpile here in the U.S. and also nuclear nonproliferation efforts. So they coordinate the nuclear safeguards efforts from the U.S., stockpile stewardship, which is basically making sure that our nuclear material is in the safe hands and secured. And we also do various outreach activities, working with other countries to make sure that we are at the forefront of nuclear safety and security and making sure that they adopt standards or best practices in exchanging those ideas.
Absolutely. So is there anything that would keep you up when you're working with these governmental agencies?
I take my job very seriously, and I know that the things I do contribute to the overall safety of our nation. I know one of the things I do not get to see is implementation on a day-to-day basis. It's not like I'm, publishing a story that's on the internet or coming out in a magazine. It's kind of this underlying sense of security and, responding to things that have happened that I get a sense of security from. But, sometimes I wonder, are we doing enough? And so it really motivates me to kind of do my part because I know it's part of a bigger mission.
Absolutely. I'm a Air Force brat. My father was in the military for 20 plus years. And actually, I have an interview tomorrow with a gentleman who is in the armed forces. And I know that even though it may not be something that a lot of people pay a lot of attention to, it's just an underlying fact that there are people who go out and serve and provide services that really protect the nation. And I appreciate that just as somebody, as a U.S. citizen who has traveled abroad, as well as a U.S. citizen who is, every day sitting down in front of my computer or sitting with my kids. There's a broad network of people who serve like you to keep our nation safe. And, I thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, like I said, it's about helping people and using my technical knowledge. So I enjoy what I do.
Great. So why do you think that being an engineer is on the list of the top 100 careers?
Well, I can tell you why, because a lot of people shy away from math and science, which, I don't know, clearly I'm an engineer, and so I go, it's drawn me in. I am math and science. I love it. I really like the logic that math and science, it's basically you have your tools in your toolbox, whether they're, algebraic equations or, differential equations that, tell you how phenomena works. So I understand that it might be a little complicated. Math and science, we speak our own language. And, it's not what's popular. It's not what's on TV. There's, House Hunters or E or that sort of thing, and it's not about solving equations and that sort of thing. So I think people gravitate towards what they're familiar with, what they see, what they understand. So I understand. STEM is misunderstood.
So what do you mean by STEM is misunderstood? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think people who work in STEM kind of sit in a cave and code or solve equations or do these things that don't actually interact with other people or are not exciting, but it's just different. It's exciting in its own way. Like, one of the things that really draws me to work is that I work with really smart people who can figure out things that I wouldn't even thought of. And I'm sure they feel the same way about me in different situations. And I think people don't understand that in STEM, you have stimulation and it's cool, but it's cool in a different way.
It's not like overtly stimulating. It's intellectually stimulating might be one of the ways that it's stimulating.
Right. And I think, me working at a national lab, and we draw some of the brightest minds here, and there's a lot of cross-cultural exchanges. I think the people I work with, people who speak Russian. I work with people who, were raised in the Ukraine. I work with a lot of different people. And I think that's something that, everybody speaks the language of science and math here. And that kind of transcends these cultural differences.
Absolutely. So if you were talking to a young girl who was good at math and science, what would you go out and say to her?
I would say if you are good in math and science and you're a girl and maybe you're, kind of on the fence about engineering, I would say think of what you like to do outside of, school or something like that, and just find out what's the engineering involved with that, because you could go into that type of engineering. I meet a lot of young ladies who want to be doctors because they feel like that's a good application of science and they help people. But, I ask them to go one step beyond that and think, there's people who have to make the equipment that's used in medical procedures who are engineers. Heart valves, knee replacement, those are all engineers. If you like clothing, then you can be a textile engineer. If you like makeup, you could be a chemical engineer developing makeup. L'Oreal, the cosmetic company, hires tons of chemical engineers. So there's engineering in everything. So don't let the fact that it's engineering and supposedly it's male-based deter you from what you want to do, because you can always use math and science everywhere.
Absolutely. I have a 13-year-old girl who is good with math and science. And so I'm definitely going to encourage her to listen to this podcast, because I think, she's at that critical stage. And we had a teacher last year that was on my list, and she was not doing particularly well in his class, and he said something, and I said, "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" And he said it again, and I was just basically said, "Don't ever tell my daughter that again." He was just like, well, maybe she's just not good with math and science. And I said, well, maybe you're just not a good teacher. And he was just like, well, I've always done really well. And I said, well, maybe you're not a good teacher for her, but do not ever say that about my daughter, because my daughter has always been good with math and science until you. And I was just like, so I know that consistently she has done particularly well in math and science. And it is only once she met you that she had a struggle with it. So I was just like, so tell me what she's got to do to do well in your class, and I will do what I need to do as a mother to make sure that she's able to meet the standards that you're requiring of her. But do not ever, ever, ever tell my daughter that she's not good with math, because I think it's only you that is the problem. So, he looked at me, I looked at him, and, and then we went on. But it was just a stunning thing for a teacher to say to, a black girl in today's society. In my mind, I was just appalled I was mad as anything. I had to make the decision. Do I keep her in this class or do I whatever, or do I move her out? And she said, you know what, Mom, I'm always going to come across people like that. And I think I have to learn how to navigate in this situation. And I just thought kudos to her because, what I wanted to do was not nice and probably would have gotten me arrested.
I don't know how old your daughter is, but that is a very astute observation. I think we as women, sometimes when we hear criticism, we take it personally, whereas men don't.
Yes.
Men, they always start, there's something wrong with the process, or I need to learn how to work the process, not so much that there's something wrong with me. And I think we as women internalize it more. So that's a very astute observation. And I can tell her to this day, I get people who say, oh, you don't look like an engineer. And my response is always say, oh, I'm the 2014 model. I'm the new model. This is the upgrade. So, or say some things like that, because you can't let people discourage you. Just because people's perceptions are one thing doesn't mean that that is reality.
Absolutely. So, Jatia, it has been a pleasure. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us, please?
I would just like to tell people that nuclear engineering is a very wide field. There is medical physics, nuclear medicine, nuclear material, nuclear power, radiation protection, and also political science applications to nuclear engineering. If you have a bright mind and you like physics and math and you want to come and work with us nuclear engineers, we are happy to have you, and we need bright minds for the future.
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or get more information on the profession, how would they go about doing that, Jatia?
I would welcome any contact from anybody who has any questions about nuclear engineering or just life in general. I am on Twitter, and my name is Jatia PhD. I also have a website, iamjatia.com, and my email address is reachjatia@gmail.com. So, reach out to me. I'd love to speak to anybody.
Absolutely. So for longtime listeners, they know that if you're listening in your car, there will be links to all of her contact information in our show notes. If you're listening in your car and you want to reach Jatia, then you can go to our show notes on our website, College Funding Resource, and we'll have links to her contact information. If you're interested in online coaching on college funding, we'll be having a class for our listeners starting in October 2014. If you want to learn more about it, listen to our recent College Expert podcast number 29, and we'll be opening up our waiting list very shortly. We want to thank you for visiting our site and listening to our podcasts and learning more about our upcoming classes. I really want to thank our listeners for joining us today, and specifically want to thank our guest, Jatia Taylor, for sharing her knowledge and expertise about nuclear engineering with our listeners. If you are wanting more information about STEM in general, we had an interview with Kai Dupree, who is a software engineer, in episode 19 of the Career 100, as well as he also contributed an interview on our College Expert Talk radio station, episode 18, on the importance of STEM. I think if you listen to this particular interview and you have interest in more about STEM, follow the links that will take you to other interviews that are dealing with engineering, science, math, and technology. All right. Thanks a lot, Jatia. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for being on the line with me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I had a great time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's edition of the Career 100 podcast. If you would like more information about planning and saving for college, please visit our site at www.collegefundingresource.com. That's www.collegefundingresource.com. This is Jen Reynolds for the Career 100 podcast.